Hey everyone, I'm Erika Lucas, your host for today. Thanks for tuning in into the Vester podcast, where we explore the conversations, strategies, systems, and policies that impact women's careers, financial well-being, and long-term economic mobility. At VEST, we believe that success is not just about individual effort. It is also about understanding the workplace structures, economic forces, and public policies that influence our opportunities. Today's conversation is about the personal and professional cost of playing it safe, of staying quiet, waiting until we're ready, minimizing our ambitions, or holding ourselves back from opportunities that could change the trajectory of our lives. As women, we're often encouraged to be humble, cautious, and risk-aware. And while there are very real reasons for that, there's also a cost when fear, self-doubt, and societal expectations keep us from stepping into our full potential. Joining us today is former Oklahoma House Democratic leader and gubernatorial candidate Cyndi Munson. Cyndi's story is a powerful example of what happens when you refuse to let other people define what is possible for you. Together, we explore leadership, ambition, resilience, and what it means to find your voice in spaces where you may not feel like you belong. We also discuss the realities women face when taking risks, the double standards that often accompany leadership, and why staying small doesn't just affect us personally, it can also limit what is possible in our communities. Let's dive in. Cyndi, going back to the topic of the month, when you hear the phrase, the cost of staying small, what comes to mind?
Oh, a whole lot. First, again, just thank you for having me and excited to be a part of the conversation today. I'm thinking a lot, obviously, a lot of what I think about in terms of your question is what I've been faced with, mostly running for governor. And it takes me back to when I first started running for office when I was 28 years old in 2013, where everyone told me, it's not possible for a Democrat to win your district. They focus so heavily on my party registration. And then, of course, mostly the men telling me and reminding me that I'm a woman. And I was in one conversation where I said, I had no idea I was a woman. Thank you for letting me know. I'm 28 years into life and I was unsure. And so, I think that, and I said this last night in my speech after getting the results, that the powers that be, whether it's men, sometimes even women, the system that we're in, the world that we operate in wants us to remain small, because if we stay small, then the powers that be get to continue to be in power. It's a way to keep us from elevating and doing the things that we envision and dream of. And I've been so encouraged by many of my friends that I have known, my entire life, my childhood, who have been texting me and saying, remember when you were in high school, when we were in high school and you would talk about this? And I would, having no idea what I was actually talking about. And here I am. And I think sometimes we do manifest things and speak things into our life that we really don't truly understand, but our true self gets it. And I think the cost of being small means that I'm looking at all the women, like those that have your cameras on, women of wide spectrum of ages, diversity. When I was asked to run for office, because I was recruited by Sally's List to run, because I was getting very vocal about the things I was seeing on the ground, and I've always had opinions on politics. I said things like, I'm Asian American. There are no Asian Americans elected. There are no Asian American women elected. What does this look like? I live off of my nonprofit salary. I have student loan debt. I am not married. I'm not a Republican. I'm pro-choice. I was listing off all these things to box myself in, because this is what the world keeps telling me isn't possible in Oklahoma. And I took a couple weeks and I realized that those were all the reasons to run. Whether I win or lose, those were all the reasons to run. And I still feel that way in Oklahoma, or excuse me, of course in Oklahoma, but as I'm running for governor, I just got off a news interview, and the narrative is still, how can a Democrat win? Like, well, if you listen to me, you would hear how a Democrat can win. And But if I continue, or if I chose to internalize what they don't believe in, that's not going to be helpful for me. And it's not going to be helpful to all of you or the state of Oklahoma who needs us to move forward. So I think the cost is not only to ourselves, but it's to our communities, whether that's our family, our neighborhood. I always think about communities as small as like your family and as wide as the state and as our country. But if we remain staying small, things don't change. That's the cost. And I think just not being true to yourself. We all have felt the feeling when we've chosen to remain quiet in a meeting, not speak up. I think about relationships even, where we choose to keep the peace and it costs us internally. So um I don't want that cost, even though it is a daily battle. You see me running for governor and think, oh, she must believe in herself every second of the day. And it is a moment by moment thing. I think that's true for all of us to keep reminding myself, you've got this and you have to keep moving forward. You have the skills um that everyone else does. So you just have to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Women spend a lot of time worrying about the consequences of taking a risk. And again, I want to acknowledge that there's a reason for that. um, but looking back in your career, what were some of the consequences of the opportunities you didn't pursue or almost didn't pursue? And
Mhm.
what did it teach you about the cost of staying small?
Oh, goodness. Great question. I think early on in my career, especially the first half of being in the legislature, the narrative or the story that was told that I believed was that, my job is to just keep my seat. And because I'm the first Democrat to represent House District 85, and it was a big win for the Democratic caucus and the party, um, I thought, my job is just head down, keep knocking doors, which is a good thing. But your job here is just to hang on to this seat for Democrats. And so I missed out. I think back on, especially as new members have come in and women have entered and joined our caucus. Um, I'm like, wow, these women are so vocal. Their first session, I was like not talking. I also think that has to do with who's in leadership. When I first came in, men were all majority caucus leaders. And then it's shifted to Emily Virgin. And then with me, majority of my leadership team has been women, and we've opened opportunities for women. But it took me a while to understand my voice at the Capitol. I kept looking to, and this isn't to say anything about anyone, just so you know, but I would look to Leader Inman and I'm like, I'm not him. I'm not this articulate attorney who wants to scream into the microphone. And I was still navigating how to build relationships. And I had a lot of fear around, if I poke the bear too much on the other side, I won't get things done. So it took probably 3 to 4 years for me to realize you can stand firm in your values, you can be vocal and ask questions and do it in a way that is challenging the other side, the powers that be, while continuing to hold on to yourself on the things that you care about and finding common ground. And as women, especially as we all know, but in a place like in politics where it's just men everywhere, they all wear the same outfit to work every day. They say the same things. I have a funny story about that too, about the governor's race, about how they're copy and paste of each other. But I'll be in committee rooms and I'm the only woman, only person of color, only Democrat. Many times I would find myself going to the front of the chamber and looking out just to remind myself, like, look where you are. You do not belong here in terms of the way the system is built. And so um I had to teach myself how to form my own voice. And if you go back like and watch my debates or how I ask questions from the very beginning to where I am today, there is huge growth. And I'm proud of myself for that. And I do wish sometimes I look back and say, 30-year-old Cyndi in 2016 had a lot to say, but she held back because she was too nervous. I was too nervous about sounding stupid or I don't sound like the men. And I wish I could go back and talk to her and say, you can do this. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. And it's not just about keeping this district represented by a Democrat. It's more than that. But we are where we are today, and I have evolved a lot, and I have a bigger platform now, and so now I could just get out of that smallness mentality. But that's where I have some regrets, and I wish I would have done better. And I deeply wish I had more mentors, and I had great mentors. But I wish we as women would do more to help each other form our voices at the Capitol.
I love that because I remind people often that conviction and strength and courage doesn't
Hmm.
come overnight, right?
Hmm.
And so I actually, I just think that thank you for being vulnerable and for being real with us because I think we're all finding our voices. And sometimes because of societal norms and because of the places that we have to operate in, it takes time and that's okay, but it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it, right? And then I also think that surrounding yourself with women who give you that encouragement to tell you that it's okay, and most importantly, that they have your back regardless, then I think that's also very important. So thank you for sharing that. Um, Again, I do want to recognize, though, that, you mentioned this, there is a double standard for women, particularly women of color, particularly for Black women, especially in politics, as we're seeing now. Um, and so, as much as we want to be brave, as much as we want to take risk, as much as we want to speak out, um, there's a double standard there. So, how do you distinguish between healthy caution and fear disguised as practicality?
Daily challenge. That's a great question. Because my fear, I mean, and this is, I think, partly just like the bigger picture of racism and sexism, but also my parents are divorced, and my dad took full custody because my mother was verbally and physically abusive. Um, and I hate saying this. I've done a lot of therapy and growth and things with how I view my mom, but when I was a little girl, she was very harsh on me, and I looked at her as someone who was always angry, and I didn't want to be like that. And I think that I internalized that for many, many years. And so I always have wanted to come off very nice. I don't want to be the angry Asian lady. Um, I don't want to be the B word, and I am I do, sort of struggle with that and balance that. Um, Ask any of my seatmates that have sat with me on the floor, and I get done with a debate and I look over and I'm like, did I sound like an angry person? But also, what's wrong with being angry? Of course, I'm angry. We don't help kids. We don't help families. Um, we push people aside. We marginalize people. Yes, I'm angry. Sometimes I get off the debate floor and I'll have colleagues, specifically men, who are like, you need to smile. It's not that big of a deal. Why are you so mad? And I'm like, why aren't you mad? I don't understand. Like, these people are screwing your community over too. And so it is a balance that you have to work out. And I think that, as women, we have to just shut that part of our brains off and just lean into our authenticity and the things that we care about, and have the courage and bravery that whether we say something or we don't say something, people are going to criticize us. Like I said, I finished an interview before I got on here. First thing I do is I get in the car, I look to my staff, I'm like, how'd I do? I forgot to say this. I should have said that. I should have been tougher on this. You know, are men doing that? I, d- I don't think so. So I just constantly figuring out ways to give myself more grace and compassion, and just remind myself you're being you, and people want to see you, because when they see you, they see themselves. And so I try to remind myself of that. But like you said, the layers of being a woman, a young woman, Asian American woman, all of that. My therapist reminds me regularly that there are not many people there aren't any actually in Oklahoma. Now I could look to other states, but in Oklahoma there have been zero Asian American women running for governor. So we're blazing a path here, and I don't have many examples to look to. And when she tells me that, I'm like, okay, thank you for the reminder. Men have a plethora of examples. We don't have that many. And I don't take that lightly. And why I elevate that I'm the first Asian American woman, one, I want people to see what's possible. that we can do this, that we don't have to let our identity keep us from these opportunities, but also remember that, I don't have a lot of examples. I hope I'm a good example and role model. Um, but yeah, it's a constant balance and battle that I have daily. And I think we all do. You don't have to be at the tippy top to have these as we're working through that. But yeah, and I think as I get older and more experienced in what I'm doing, I can better identify, is this fear or is this caution or is this a strategy? How do I navigate all of this?
I want to ask you something because I used to struggle with it. Now I kind of embrace it. But I've been told several times that I come across as overly confident or cocky or arrogant, and all of the above.
Hmm.
Um, and it used to bother me because I never saw myself as that.
Hmm.
I do think there's a difference between being cocky and arrogant and just having conviction in
Hmm.
your beliefs and not needing validation from anyone. But,
Hmm.
that's another story. How, um, what do you think about women who are often encouraged to be humble and grateful? And of course, we all want uh, those things, right? And I don't think I need to say that with Invest. I think women are inherently, excuse me, allergies are terrible. I think women are inherently grateful and kind and collaborative and humble. There's a problem when it becomes something that where you internalize that you can't be ambitious too, right? How have you learned to embrace ambition without apologizing for it?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, great question. Humility has always been a value of mine in that, I just never want to get too big for my britches. It's like the hard work matters, it counts. I think it develops your character, it sharpens your skills, it helps you connect with people. That is all very important to me. Again, another just daily, you know, exercise I have to go through, which is this humility or is this fear and um or fear or like doing a disservice to the work I've put in. So I have always, and I'm sure everyone here is mostly aware of Enneagram, the Enneagram, anyone at Enneagram 3. So I probably most of us. And so for me, hard work, putting in the work, being competitive, have something to measure yourself against has always been what drives me. In terms of how I focus and things like that. And so hard work and putting in my work helps me to see, one, to remain humble, because I think when you do the work you see that it takes effort and this doesn't just come to you. You're putting in the effort, you're meeting the opportunity. And then on the other side, it's also a reminder that when you want to start beating yourself up, which I enjoy doing, my critical voice has shrunk a little bit over time, but she gets loud when I'm tired and hungry and thirsty and all that. Um, but I have to look back and say, look at all the doors you've knocked. Look at the amount of money you've raised. Look at the people you have, the coalitions you've built. Look at the things you've done. You wouldn't have gotten here without that work ethic and the effort that you've put in. And so I think that's what over time has given me confidence. I don't think you're cocky. I think I'm inspired by confidence and conviction and knowing your worth. My deep rooted fear is not being worthy. So I have to also balance, are you overworking because you're trying to be worthy or earn someone's love? Or so politics is a tricky place for people like me, um or do you already know your worth, you're putting in the work and getting it done? So that's a daily, yes, the immigrant dilemma, absolutely. And I think what I love about women leaders and the conversation we're having is that we know that the challenges that we face and the things that go through our brains as we're leading and doing big things. It's not just the system, the bigger system, it's also just our who we are as people, our childhood, our upbringing, the history of our culture or what our parents have gone through. Um, that has been an eye-opening experience for me to be more aware of my full self. Being raised by a single dad who adores us and loves us. I mean, if you watch some of the news interviews from last night, I mean, he's like right behind me and he's like trying to kiss my forehead. And it's like, Dad, I'm trying to do an interview, but he supports me so much. But that feeling of like, why isn't my mom still, why is she proud? What is she thinking? When we have had a challenging relationship, we don't talk. It's been over 2 decades now that we just don't, you know, um, so and all of that is like again layered on top of the big things we're doing. And so quieting that voice, um, I think sometimes people think for us it's just, oh, we hate men and we hate the system. And it's like, no, it's all of it. And then our own personal experiences and lived experiences that we bring into it. So that those are things, I know I'm kind of getting deeper here, but those are things that I bring with me in all of that I'm doing. And I see it. And I also think it's what's given me the ability to connect with people and have compassion and empathy for folks because I can see them deeper than just where do you stand on this policy issue?
I love that. I love that. Thank you. And here at Bez, we love going deep. So,
Yeah, good. Because whoops.
yes. All right, members, this is your chance. We're going to open it up for questions. I know you guys are eager to ask Cyndi many questions. She is potentially our next governor. So, have at it, whether you want to do it on the chat or just unmute yourself. But before I turn it over to you, let's open it up because I'm sure most of the questions are going to be around your race and politics.
Mhm.
So running for office, for the governor, I mean, you've already been at the state legislature, but going after the governor's position is a bold decision.
Mhm.
What fears or doubts did you have to overcome before deciding to put your name forward?
Outside of just the party affiliation and all of that and just, where I stand on issues, I think, 'cause when you look at my background, I mean, think about the typical candidate for governor and what we're already seeing, right? Veteran, rancher, lawyer, banker, business guy, they all wear blue suits, red ties, white shirts. Not me. So I actually find myself going back to 28-year-old Cyndi in 2013, listing off all the things that wouldn't qualify me to be a state representative. I'm grateful I'm now 41, but I was 40, well, I was 39 when I was making the decision. Anyway, a decade plus has gone by, right? And now I just think, these are all assets. I have a different perspective. Um, Being in the nonprofit world, they're going to paint me, like I said, just a little girl, no executive experience, etc. Um, and those stories creep into my mind. I don't come from wealth. I will never be able to fundraise the amount that they have because they're giving themselves millions of dollars. And so I try to, my fears have been, or just things that almost held me back was, I'm not going to be riding on a horse in a commercial. Okay. I'm not going to shoot a gun at you. These are things I'm not going to do. And I'm not willing to make myself look like something I'm not. And so I think, is who I am enough for Oklahomans? Um, Being a young woman, growing up in Southwest Oklahoma, just living life like most Oklahomans are, is that enough? So that's probably what comes up that comes up the most and what almost held me back. Um, but I know that most Oklahomans live the life that I live and have lived the life that I've lived, and I know connecting with them is most important, and that's what's going to help me break through the political affiliation, the money, the millions of ads you see on TV. That connection is really important. Um, I would say where I'm at now, the weight of everything is building because Yeah, being a state representative is a lot different than being governor, obviously. But people are, it's not just the policy sides of things and just what you have to execute as a governor, but the hopes and dreams that people are putting on me. I feel that. I don't take that lightly. I've never experienced people come up to me and cry. I'm usually the one doing that to politicians or people that I believe in. And you can just feel they want something better for their state and for themselves and their families. And I don't take any of that lightly. And that's the daily thing that I take home, that I'm just like, oh, I don't want to fail these people. I don't want to fail the woman who is crying to me about her children, and so but I do feel ready. I do feel ready that I know what I've lived through. I know what's at stake for Oklahomans, and so I feel ready to take on the job.
Well, we're glad that you overcame all of those doubts and that you're here. Beverly, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll turn it over to Jay to help moderate some of the questions on the chat.
Oh, thank you, Cyndi. First of all, thank you for joining us today. It's really an honor to have you. Um, I have a question. Oklahoma is often referred to as not just a red state, but the reddest state in the union, in the country. But I was recently reminded by a friend that we're really not it's not that we're a red state, we're a non-voting state. Our people in Oklahoma do not vote. So I guess my question is, what is your strategy for increasing voter turnout? And do you think that will make a difference in your race? And by the way, I looked, but I couldn't tell what the voter turnout was yesterday. Maybe and maybe we're making some progress there. But talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about voter turnout.
Great question. And thank you for reminding all of us we are not a red state, Republican state. We are a gerrymandered state. We are Republican controlled. We are not a Republican state. And when you look at, the data that people look at, I think it's skewed because of the way our system is set up. Gerrymandering's number one, straight party voting, closed primaries, and like you said, low voter turnout. And what we knew and what really convinced me to run for governor, because I had the same doubts that some people like to push on me, that a Democrat can't win statewide. I'm like, I have one more term to run for that I know I can win. Why would I do that to myself, But when you dig deeper into the data, let's first talk about midterm elections. First, Joy and Drew in the last two most recent gubernatorial elections lost by 160,000 votes. That's really not a lot when you look statewide on where you need to find your voters. We have 500,000 registered Democrats and independents who are not voting in midterm elections. So to your point, we have low voter turnout. People are sitting on the sideline. And these are voters. They're voting in presidential primaries and the presidential elections, but they're not voting in the midterm for governor and these other down ballot races that are, I would say, equally, if not more important than who we're electing as president. And so my job and what I've been focused on is energizing and connecting with and energizing those who are not voting. And those are predominantly, like I said, Democrats, independents, and I would say middle of the road Republicans who are not buying into Trump and the MAGA messaging and all that. So my job is to increase voter turnout and get those voters to vote for me. And I think where Oklahomans are, they are my biggest challenge I have to overcome is not voter registration. It's apathy. And people are apathetic because they don't feel like those in power are connecting with the issues that they care about or understand them. And so they don't feel the need to get out there and vote. One thing I've learned as I've knocked doors over the decade plus I've been in the legislature, and I've talked mostly to registered Republicans and earned their votes, is that you have to get face to face with them. You have to do direct voter outreach. And it is absolutely more difficult in a statewide race. And I think where Republicans are making a mistake, although I'm happy for them to continue doing what they're doing. I'm curious to know how many of you all were convinced by any of the candidates running for governor on the Republican side watching their commercials. What did they tell you about you or the issues you care about? They talked about Trump, bananas, racism was intertwined in all of their commercials. And we're going to see more of that in the next 2 months because these guys are rich and they're ruthless. And they're going to go after each other. Meanwhile, I'm on the ground talking to voters face to face. We're texting them, we're connecting with them on social media. The direct voter contact is very important. So that's our strategy. I'm not saying you'll never see me on TV. You won't see me until later, but that's not moving the needle. And in terms of turnout, the turnout was low. I will hear more on the data, but also remember that independents were barred from voting in the primaries, which is a big issue. Obviously, the state question was there, but I think that people wanted, and I know we have registered independents, and I know folks who are obviously in favor of the open primary state question, who are very upset that they weren't able to engage in the primary and vote for a candidate. I think the Republican Party, I haven't looked at all the breakdown of their turnout, if it was a larger turnout than the last gubernatorial. I'll get all that information, but my gut tells me that they are not as energized. They will be worn down. I will tell you, I've talked to Republicans who have said, my father's one, who said, I don't like any of these guys. I don't know what they stand for. I don't know what their vision is. And so our strategy is just focus on Oklahomans and the issues that matter, and increase voter turnout. And that's the work we're going to have to do. And sometimes it is harder. I will admit that. It's harder to get someone who feels apathetic that nothing will change and get them out to vote. But you are absolutely right. We are actually more, if we had independent redistricting, if we had open primaries and we got rid of straight party voting, we'd be more of a purple state, middle of the road.
I will also add, Cyndi, that I think it's important for us to step up too. I think that one of the main challenges Oklahoma has is that we are really terrible at organizing consistently and over time. So we'll organize and we'll go vote, and then we forget that we have to build community consistently and continue to talk about these issues and continue to organize to put everything on a single candidate in a state that requires so much change. It's not possible. So I would just encourage all of us to think about that and figure out how we can better organize as a collective within our own circles of influence in a consistent manner, because this will require all of us to pitch in, not just the candidates putting their name forward. With that, Jay, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us what's happening on the chat.
Oh my gosh, so much is happening, but lots of love and support. First of all, I mean, everybody is so excited that you're here, Cyndi. So thank you so much. And we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions. I'm sorry, besties, we have a lot, but just to go through some, Monica I love this question. She wants to know, who are your role models that help you see that victory is possible?
Oh, great question. It's like a lot of people, like people blended in. Right now, I think a lot about, everyone said that Obama would never be president because he was an organizer. And, this guy is an attorney, obviously, we know, incredibly intelligent. And I think back on when he first really started getting into politics, and they're like, oh, he's just, in church basements talking to people. He'll never, amount to anything in elected politics. So I think about him a lot, and I'm like, I don't want to be president, by the way. That's not an aspiration. But I think, what he has taught me in politics, and I was an Obama supporter in the beginning. I'm a HRC girl, and it took a lot for me to come around. But because I thought I was betraying, but what I've appreciated is, and what I look to is, this is a person who understood how important it is to connect with people. And I think that's why he remains so popular and somebody we continue to look to, especially if, obviously a Democrat, you're looking for hope and change, as he's known for. I'm thinking of other. I don't know why this question is so hard for me. I'll tell you what I look for. The characteristics I look for is I'm an underdog, right? So I'm always looking for those underdog stories, and how do we overcome, just the stories and the narratives that are out there that try to keep us down. right now I've been very focused too on Governor Anatubby, somebody who is, I just think a guy with, 50 years of service to the Chickasaw Nation, and hardly anyone says anything bad about him. Nobody. I've never heard anyone say anything negative. And that's the kind of service that I want. I'm like, we should all aspire to be someone like him who's able to um do big things and still hold on to relationships, and you don't do big things without challenging the status quo. um, Hillary Clinton is obviously someone I look to and continue to look to. Maxine Horner, who is a state senator, she was the architect behind Oklahoma's Promise. She is why I'm able to do what I'm doing, and I'm grateful every day. I was able to thank her in 2018 at a higher ed dinner that I was able to go to college because of her determination to help students like me. Um, and being a lawmaker myself, I think about how you are, you're looking at ways to improve people's lives, and you want to, you have this idea. And yes, you're thinking about this is going to help people, but you don't really always go, to one person, because that's impossible sometimes. And to think like Maxine Horner, who had no idea who little Cyndi Munson was, she's crafting this legislation, but she believes so deeply that children like me should have an opportunity to go to college, regardless of our family income, and what other challenges were in place. So that's what I think about, who I think about. My dad, of course, who has put his life on the line for the country and for his family. And even for my mom, even though we have a challenging relationship and it's very difficult for me and there's a lot of pain, um, as I've gotten older, there's more compassion thinking about a woman who came to a country where she didn't speak the language, she didn't understand the processes, and she's made it through. Um, and Yeah, that's what I look to. So, Monica, sorry, I don't have just one name or one person. It's a combination. I don't know why that anytime anyone asks me that, it's always been so hard for me, because I think I just like take a little bit of something from everyone and I like bring it together. But for me, it's the overcomer. It's seeing beyond, letting just silencing the naysayers are my heroes.
Yes, Vanessa, go ahead.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. And hi, Cyndi. Thank you so much for being here today. And big congratulations to you. I've been following you since your Sally's List days back in the day. And I'm just incredibly proud of you and inspired by your journey. I'm Vanessa Morrison. I'm an urban planner based here in Oklahoma City. And I'm someone who's constantly working with the built environment, the physical spaces that make up our communities to address inequities in Black communities. And oftentimes I hear leaders talk about the disparities across Oklahoma related to education, health, job disparities, so on and so forth, but it's not always acknowledged how the physical environment, our homes, neighborhoods, streets, and all the physical spaces in between are shaping these outcomes and people's ability to reach their full potential. So I'm just curious as to how you might advocate for investments in the built environment, homes, parks, neighborhoods that can actually improve quality of life and address some of these disparities that have been just layered and so heightened in Oklahoma since the beginning of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Vanessa. And thanks for all of your support. I'm going to give one quick story. When I was working for the Girl Scouts at the very beginning of my career, I had a group of girls that I worked with on the northeast side of Oklahoma City. And, the way that we tried to keep girls engaged and involved in Girl Scouts is have incentives, just the badges, that's how Girl Scouts is built. And I remember asking them, what's one thing that you want to do, to celebrate all your hard work. And I remember they wanted to go, what's the Melting Pot? Is it called Melting Pot? What's that restaurant in Bricktown? Is it still there?
I
What's it
think
called?
so.
Is it Melting Pot, or you know what I mean? The fondue place.
Yes.
Anyway, so we went there, and you would have thought that we were at Disney World. And I bring that up because I remember thinking, it's right down the street from their school, their neighborhood, but it feels like a world away because there's no way to get there. There's no way to connect these two communities or one community and help people to see that they belong in both places, right? I think a lot about, just what, especially girls, what they can envision for themselves. And it's very small when they don't have access to more opportunities. So all that being said, for me, and what I'm encouraged by as I have, and I hope you're encouraged by this too, as I've traveled across the state, I've met with, smaller chambers of commerce, economic development groups, and what they're talking about right now. Republicans are going to talk about cutting taxes, and they think this is how we bring economic development, it's how we increase quality of life. But it's not. It is investment in local communities around childcare, housing, parks, sidewalks.
Yes.
I talked to a gentleman who does economic development in El Reno, and he said one of the best investments they have made is a park, just a community park that's free. And that's gotten more people interested in El Reno industries, businesses, families that are wanting to stay, because this is where people are. This is where they know they want community, they want connection. And so that's why I'm opposed to cutting the income tax. That's why I'm opposed to cutting the property tax. Cost of living is high. We have to address those things. But if we don't have revenue coming into our state government and our local governments to make these investments, I don't know how, we do all these things that we know people care about. So I understand the inequities of not having connection in smaller communities and doing these things that we know actually help people build their families and invest in their families, and then of course their economic opportunities. So for me, and when we're looking at where state government is right now, I think too many of our tax dollars are going outward. We're trying to, and we do have to bring bigger industry to Oklahoma, of course. But I think we've invested way too much of that and gotten away from local investment. And that's where I want to put our priorities. And should I become governor, have those conversations with you and other local leaders on how we can do better. And this is why your local leadership matters, your county commissioners, your city council members, where they're putting our tax dollars. And I think this is why people are also wanting those cuts, because they're not seeing where their tax money's going. And I would say those who are in communities where there's not investment, it's even worse for them to see what's possible, because we're not making those investments. So that's important to me. And I'm very encouraged to hear that chambers of commerce are realizing we have to get back to focusing on families and people and how we invest in them, and not just big companies.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great question, Vanessa. And I have a follow-up to that before I turn it back to Jay to see if there are more questions in the chat. One of my pet peeves around Democrat versus Republicans is, and I think the Republicans have done a great job at branding themselves as the party for businesses. Where I think people are not paying attention is what type of businesses. Right? Because, and I'm going to pick on my friends at the chambers. I'm a former economic developer, so I think I've earned my right to do that. But I think that oftentimes we hear this narrative about being pro-business. And the reason I think this is an important question is about 50% of our members at VEST, and of course, Stitch grew 100%, but 50% of our VEST members are business owners. And often you hear this narrative that, well, if you are pro-business, if you believe in businesses and entrepreneurship and all of this, then you need to vote Republican because they are the party for business. But what I challenge people to think is, what size of business? Because even the SBA, right? Like the SBA, you can be, I can't remember, 500 million or 500 employees, millions of dollars in revenue, where, 98% of businesses throughout the country are under $1 million. And so I think it's very important that we challenge the narrative a little bit more when, these broad talking points are said. And then at the same time, I want Democrats to do a better job at talking to small business owners and getting out there and saying, no, listen, we are for small businesses. We believe, that you guys should thrive. And the incentives for small businesses are very different than the incentives we were given SpaceX or the contracts we're given, I do think that there is such a missed opportunity, and I hope that hopefully your campaign embraces it. Everybody embraces it, because small businesses, the ones that are not sexy because they're not getting private investment or they're not being highlighted on all this, tech platforms and stuff, they're the ones keeping our economy afloat. But we just don't give them the spotlight ever because they're not sexy to talk about, right? They're called mainstream businesses.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I had a small business, and it was small, so we want to keep doing this. But small business roundtable, and I wanted to know, like, what are the tax issues, or what are some of the things where government does get in the way? And it was interesting because the conversation there was mostly, especially because this was in Oklahoma City, around housing, because they're like, the homelessness challenges we face as a city is impacting our business. And these are folks who are like, you got to invest more in services and housing and things, so that because there are things happening, on the doorstep of their business. I am going to be doing this again in Enid tomorrow. And I would love to organize something with Vest members to hear, how can we want to have this conversation. And this is where I'm really focused, because I agree with you that I think we spend so much time, like I said, giving our tax dollars away and having conversation about bigger industry. And those folks, as soon as that tax incentive's up, they're gone. And many times, and I will critique the chamber too, because their own members have said it's not about the income tax. It is about investment in education, investment in services, making sure your people are ready and healthy and educated to be in the workforce. That's what we're more interested in, which Democrats are better on those issues. And I'm glad when their own survey says it, of like, your members are telling you what you want, and childcare. So you're absolutely right. And I want to do more around focusing on local Oklahoma businesses and entrepreneurs. You're already here. We need to make those investments to stay here. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. And we as Democrats have to do better. And I'm hoping to do that with my campaign.
Thank you, Cyndi. Jay, anything else happening in the chat, or anyone else have any questions?
Yes, lots of questions. This one came from a couple people talking about the minimum wage proposal being voted down yesterday, and lots of disappointment, and it feels discouraging to a lot of us. And Kendra asked, how can we change the tide in the rural areas of our state? And she also said, having previously worked in the food security space, those are the areas that most need a livable wage. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, it is very disappointing. I think I'll just speak really quickly to the state question. I think there were just so many issues first with the governor pushing it 2 years out. Had this been on the ballot as soon as those signatures were approved, like the earliest election, an election with a higher turnout, would have been helpful. And he knows that. He knows that. That's why they are trying to take control and make all these changes for the initiative petition process, because the people are not in alignment, or they are not in alignment with where the people are. I think the misinformation campaign, the scare tactics about businesses shutting down. I do think there was the confusion around, when the rate, the minimum wage would go up at what point, like, 2025 already passed. Like, I had someone talk to me about that. Some of the exemptions, I think there were a lot of factors within the state question that just created too much confusion, in my opinion. And that's not to disparage those who put the question together. It's that the system, the powers that be, they wanted it to be like this, to be confusing and difficult for people to get behind. So all that to say, in terms of rural Oklahoma, I will give you an example of I was in Sulphur on Saturday. I was in a small restaurant, and I talked to a couple women, one who was not registered to vote. She is now, and she'll be voting in November, who's making $9 an hour as a cashier, living in an apartment that is filled with mold that her landlord is not addressing. And she, of course, was like, I don't know if I'm a Democrat or Republican, and then said, are Democrats pro-abortion? That's where her head went, because that's the narrative she's hearing, right? So I'm the first person she's ever seen run for office, talk to her as a human being, first Democrat she's ever met. And this is why we have to be on the ground, and we just have to do better as Democrats, making ourselves more present and known and having these face-to-face conversations. This is a bigger infrastructure issue with the party and county parties, and we have made improvement. I will say that, and I'm grateful for that. But as candidates being out there, and that's why I will not say no to any small town. I don't care if they voted for Trump 98%. I'm going because I relate to these people. I understand what they're going through. And I was in Latimer County the last week, and I had Republicans come up to me because only Democratic candidates showed up, and they said they think they have us locked in. They do not, and so I'm encouraged by those conversations. But it's going to take a huge effort. It takes a lot of work, Kendra, as you know, and you're absolutely right. All of the economic challenges, or majority of the economic challenges that Oklahomans face, are concentrated in rural areas because they don't have access to services. There are not a plethora of nonprofits out there providing services. I'm also very encouraged by the number of people I've met that are running food pantries, and they're helping people get to their doctor's appointments. Thank God for our tribes that are in rural Oklahoma helping every which way that they can, but the state has got to step up. And so all I can do is just be on the ground, be as present as possible, go myself and ask questions. When I'm getting a coffee at a small coffee shop, and we tried to go to small businesses and small communities too, to get business, in there and get people spending their money. I do ask, what is your wage? What are you getting paid? That's how I found out the $9 an hour. I was in McAllister, young woman making $7.25 an hour. So for all the people who say, no, they're not. Yes, they are. And so we just have to keep communicating and breaking through where we can.
Cyndi, I knew we would run out of time.
Yeah, I know.
But,
and I have so much more to say too. So I'm sorry.
I know. And we have so much more to ask.
Yeah.
But let's close with this. What is your pitch for this position? Why should people vote for you? And what can people do to support your campaign?
Yeah, I believe I should be Oklahoma's next governor because I do understand what everyday Oklahomans are going through. And I think what we have been missing in politics at a local level and a national level is someone who understands and is willing to be open to finding solutions and working with the other side of the aisle. I will be a Democratic governor working with a Republican legislature. That's just a fact. Hopefully not a supermajority, but they will still be in the majority. And I have a track record of working with the other side and coming to solutions and helping Oklahomans. Eliminating the state sales tax on groceries is one, but I have had many bills signed into law by both governors Mary Fallin and Kevin Stitt, who we don't agree on everything. And I wouldn't have been able to get those things done if it weren't for building relationships in a coalition with Republicans. So what that should tell you is that we have the ability to work together. You just haven't been able to see it because we've been under one party control with a lot of toxicity and a lot of dysfunction with no focus on you. And it's time that you have somebody who knows what you're going through and has the urgency to solve those problems. And I clearly care and have the compassion and empathy for people. I'm willing to do the hard work. And I think that should be recognized in this campaign for governor. Ways that you can support me is certainly donating. The biggest area that I will not compete, but I am playing a different game than they are. I do not have millions to give myself. So every dollar that an Oklahoman gives, that goes towards continuing to travel the state, getting my message out to Oklahomans. If you want to see me on TV, if you want my message getting out to rural Oklahoma and having the ability to be out there, chipping in a monthly donation really does help at whatever amount that you can give. The maximum is $3,500 per individual. So if you can do that, that will go a long way. And then signing up to volunteer, getting on the doorstep, sending out text messages, finding ways to get your circle of influence involved in this campaign is very important. And getting on social media, sharing and resharing what we're putting out there gets my message out as well. And just breaking down that narrative of disbelief that things can't change and that a Democrat can't win or a young woman can't win. Think about your own story and how many people told you couldn't do what you're doing today. Embrace that, own it, and help me spread the message that anything can happen when we work hard, we believe in ourselves, and we do the things that we know are necessary to win. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for everything that you're doing in our community, what you're doing for yourself. It inspires me to keep going. And I really appreciated the conversation and absolutely wish we had more time. And so hopefully I can come back. And I do want to have a roundtable discussion with some of your members around small business. I want to strengthen what we're talking about and our messaging on helping small businesses throughout our state.
Happy to help you on that end and maybe do another follow-on with small business owners. Thank you so much, Cyndi. I couldn't agree with you more when people say to me, well, this can't happen, is well, not with that fucking attitude.
That's right.
So it starts with us. Part of being a leader is hope is a discipline. And we have to show up with hope. We have to give people a reason to win, a reason to fight, a reason to show up. If we come in depleted and saying that we can't do it, that doesn't inspire anyone. That doesn't turn apathy away. But I think it's going to take all of us to make this change. I am so grateful for you, Cyndi, not just for showing up to this session and this recording, but also for putting your name out there, for not playing it small, and for being an example for all of us on courage, on conviction, and on showing up for ourselves and our communities. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed the episode, share with a friend and don't forget to leave us a review. And if you're ready to take your career to the next level, apply to join our community of women eager to help you get there and stay there. Go to www.vesther.co to learn more.